Reading through the Bible in one year, December 21st, Second Chronicles chapter 25, Revelation chapter 12, Zechariah 8, and John chapter 11. Amaziah became king when he was 25 years old, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoaddan. She was from Jerusalem. He did what was right in Yahweh's sight, but not wholeheartedly. As soon as the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed his servants who had killed his father the king. However, he did not put to death or put their children to death, because, as it is written in the law, in the book of Moses, where Yahweh commanded, fathers are not to die because of children, and children are not to die because of fathers, but each one will die for his own sins. Then Amaziah gathered Judah and assembled them according to ancestral families, according to commanders of thousands, according to commanders of hundreds, and according to commanders of hundreds. He numbered those 20 years old or more for all Judah and Benjamin. He found there to be 300,000 fit young men who could serve in the army, bearing spear and shield. Then, for 7,500 pounds of silver, he hired 100,000 valiant warriors from Israel. However, a man of God came to him and said, "King, do not let Israel's army go with you, for Yahweh is not with Israel, all the Ephraimites. But if you do go with them, do it. Be strong for battle, but God will make you stumble before the enemy, for God has the power to help or to make one stumble." Then Amaziah said to the man of God, "What should I do about the 7,500 pounds of silver I gave to Israel's division?" The man of God replied, "The Lord is able to give you much more than this." So Amaziah released the division that came to him from Ephraim to go home. But they got very angry with Judah and returned home in fierce rage. Amaziah strengthened his position and led his people to the Salt Valley, or the Valley of Salt. He struck down 10,000 Sarites, and the Judahites captured 10,000 alive. They took them to the top of a cliff where they threw them off, and all of them were dashed to pieces. As for the men of the division that Amaziah had sent back, so they would not go with him into battle, they raided the cities of Judah from Samaria to Beth Horon, struck down 3,000 of their own people, and took a great deal of plunder. After Amaziah came from the attack on the Edomites, he brought the gods of the Sarites and set them up as his own gods. Again, he wasn't serving God entirely. He worshipped before them and burned incense to them. So Yahweh's anger was against Amaziah, and he sent a prophet to him who said, "Why have you sought a people's gods that could not rescue their own people from you?" While he was still speaking with him, the king asked, "Have we made you the king's counselor? Stop. Why should you lose your life?" So the prophet stopped. But he said, "I know that God intends to destroy you, because you have done this and have not listened to my advice." King Amaziah of Judah took counsel and sent word to Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, king of Israel, and challenged him, "Come, let's meet face to face." King Jehoash of Israel sent word to King Amaziah of Judah, saying, "The thistle in Lebanon sent a message to the cedar in Lebanon, saying, 'Give your daughter to my son for a wife.' Then a wild animal in Lebanon passed by and trampled that thistle. You have said, 'Look, I have defeated Edom,' and you have become overconfident that you will get glory. Now stay at home. Why stir up such trouble that you will fall, and Judah with you?" But Amaziah would not listen, for this turn of events was brought from God in order to hand them over to their enemies, because they went after the gods of Edom. So King Jehoash of Israel advanced. He and King Amaziah of Judah met face to face at Beth Shemesh, that belonged to Judah. Judah was routed before Israel, and each man fled to his own tent. King Jehoash of Israel captured Judah's king Amaziah, son of Jehoahaz, at Beth Shemesh. Then Jehoash took him to Jerusalem and broke down 200 yards of Jerusalem's wall from the Ephraim gate to the corner gate. He took all the gold, silver, all the utensils that were found with Obed Edom in God's temple, the treasures of the king's palace, and the hostages. Then he returned to Samaria. Judah's king Amaziah, son of Joash, lived 15 years after the death of Israel's king Jehoash, son of Jehoahaz. The rest of the events of Amaziah's reign, from beginning to end, are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. From the time Amaziah turned from following Yahweh, a conspiracy was formed against him in Jerusalem, and he fled to Lachish. However, men were sent after him to Lachish, and they put him to death there. They carried him back on horses and buried him with his ancestors in the city of Judah. Now Revelation chapter 12. A great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with a moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Again, this gets weird. Read the notes. She was pregnant and cried out in labor and agony as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. There was a fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its heads were 7 crowns. Its tail swept away 1/3 of the stars in heaven and hurled them to the earth. And the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she did give birth, it might devour her child. She gave birth to a son, a male who is going to rule all the nations with an iron rod. Her child was caught up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared by God to be nourished there for 1,260 days. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels also fought, but he could not prevail, and there was no place for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world. He was thrown to earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "The salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ," remember, Christ is a title, "have now come. Because the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been thrown down. They conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they did not love their lives to the point of death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you with great fury, because he knows that his time is short." When the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she could fly from the serpent's presence to her place in the wilderness, where she was nourished for a time, times, and half a time. From his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river, flowing after the woman, to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth helped the woman. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river that the dragon had spewed from his mouth. So the dragon was furious. We are losing notes over here. Let me bring those up here real quick. There we go. So the dragon was furious with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commands of God, and hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. The dragon stood on the sand of the sea. Now Zechariah chapter 8. The word of the Lord of armies came. The Lord of armies says this: I am extremely jealous for Zion. I am jealous for her with great wrath. Yahweh says this: I will return to Zion and live in Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem will be called the faithful city. The mountain of the Lord of armies will be called the holy mountain. The Lord of armies says this: old men and women will again sit along the streets of Jerusalem, each with a staff in hand, because of advanced age. The streets of the city will be filled with boys and girls playing in them. The Lord of armies says this: though it may seem impossible to the remnant of this people in those days, should it also seem impossible to me? This is the declaration of the Lord of armies. The Lord of armies says this: I will save my people from the land of the east and the land of the west. I will bring them back to live in Jerusalem, and they will be my people, and I will be their faithful and righteous God. The Lord of armies says this: let your hands be strong. You who now hear these words that the prophets spoke when the foundations were laid for the rebuilding of the temple of the house of the Lord of armies. For prior to those days, neither people nor animals had wages. There was no safety from the enemy for anyone who came or went, for I turned everyone against his neighbor. But now I will not treat the remnant of this people as in the former days. This is the declaration of the Lord of armies. For they will sow in peace. The vine will yield its fruit. The land will yield its produce, and the skies will yield their dew. I will give the remnant of this people all these things as an inheritance. As you have been a curse among the nations, house of Judah and house of Israel, so I will save you, and you will be a blessing. Don't be afraid. Let your hands be strong. For the Lord of armies says this: as I resolved to treat you badly when your ancestors provoked me to anger, and I did not relent, says the Lord of armies, so I have resolved again in these days to do what is good to Jerusalem and the house of Judah. Do not be afraid. These are the things you must do. Speak truth to one another. Make true and sound decisions within your city gates. Do not plot evil in your hearts against your neighbor, and do not love perjury. For I hate all this. This is the Lord's declaration. Then the word of the Lord of armies came to me. The Lord of armies says this: the fast of the 4th month, and the fast of the 5th, and the fast of the 7th, and the fast of the 10th will become times of joy, gladness, and cheerful festivals for the house of Judah. Therefore, love, truth, and peace. The Lord of armies says this: peoples will yet come, the residents of many cities. The residents of one city will go to one another, saying, let's go at once to plead for Yahweh's favor and to seek Yahweh, the Lord of armies. I am also going. Many peoples and strong nations will come to seek Yahweh, the Lord of armies in Jerusalem, and to plead for Yahweh's favor. The Lord of armies says this: in those days, 10 men from nations of every language will grab the robe of a Jewish man tightly, urging, let us go with you, for we have heard that God is with you. Now John chapter 11. Now a man was sick, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. And it was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sister sent a message to him: Lord, the one you love is sick. When Jesus heard it, he said, the sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he immediately rushed to help? No. Because he loved them, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. Then, after that, he said to his disciples, let's go to Judea again. Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews tried to stone you, and you're going there again? Aren't there 12 hours in the day? Jesus answered. If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble, but he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble, because the light is not in him. He said this, and then he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. This is the first place where Jesus refers to death as sleep, which is a common idiom that the Christians use. Then the disciples said to him, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will get well. Jesus, however, was speaking about his death. Excuse me. But they thought he was speaking about natural sleep. So Jesus then told them plainly, Lazarus has died. I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe. But let's go to him. Then Thomas, called Twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too so that we may die with him. I don't know if that was sarcastic or not. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. This is capital J Jews. This is the ruling class of the Jews. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been there, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. That's a lot of faith. Your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she told him. I believe you are the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of God who comes into the world. Having said this, she went back and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, and they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to cry there. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. When Jesus saw her crying, and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. Lord, they told him, come and see. Jesus, the King of glory, the one who spoke and the universe leapt into existence, wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes, again, a guy who was born blind, no eyes in his head, also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, Lord, there's already a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. Jesus said to her, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this, so that they may believe you sent me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, bound hand and foot with linen strips, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unwrap him and let him go. Therefore many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees, to tattle, and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin, This is the large communal, not communal, the large ruling body of these Jews. Same by Jews, I mean the capital J, the ruling class of the Jews. And we're saying, what are we going to do since this man is doing many signs? Or what Jesus said, if you don't believe in me, believe in the signs, because they point to God and they testify about Jesus that he is the Christ. If we let this man go on like this, everyone will believe in him. Oh no. And the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation. They weren't worried about Jesus being the actual Christ. That kind of bothered them because they didn't think it was going to be him. They don't want to be proven wrong, but they don't want to lose their position of power. Verse 49, one of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all. You're not considering that it is to your advantage that one man should die for the people, then the whole nation perish. He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to unite the scattered children of God. So from that day on, they plotted to kill him. Jesus, therefore, no longer walked openly among the Jews, but departed from there to the countryside near the wilderness, to a town called Ephraim, and he stayed there with the disciples. Now, the Jewish Passover was near, and many went up to Jerusalem from the country to purify themselves before the Passover. They were looking for Jesus and asking one another as they stood in the temple, what do you think? He won't come to the festival, will he? The chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that if anyone knew where he was, he should report it so that they could arrest him. And that is all of the notes up to here. There we go. And that is all we have for today. So, God willing, we'll be back tomorrow. Behold, the word of the Lord.